a la doctora Paola Rodari. Ella está en el Cinvestav como cortesía de los colegas de la UNAM. Me ha invitado a un taller sobre comunicación de la ciencia, que por supuesto la UNAM tiene universo, una dirección general de comunicación de la ciencia y mucho presupuesto. Entonces, gracias a la cortesía de ellos que pagaron el boleto de avión, Paola está con nosotros. Nos va a ofrecer primero este seminario sobre una forma de acortar la brecha entre ciencia y sociedad. Paola tiene más de 20 años como experiencia en el proceso de comunicación de la ciencia. Trabaja en una institución, una universidad italiana, SISSA MediaLab, que está en Trieste. Es una universidad que está muy conectada con algo que los físicos conocen mucho, el ICTP, el Institute for el Center for International Theoretical Physics, es una universidad más dirigida a ciencias duras, pero tiene este departamento de comunicación de la ciencia donde Paola trabaja. Tiene mucha experiencia en experimentos relacionados con la comunicación de la ciencia a nivel de museos de ciencia. Y hoy, bueno, nos va a dar el seminario, pero mañana y el miércoles va a ofrecer un taller sobre una nueva metodología que han desarrollado en Europa para establecer una comunicación con el público en general. Este taller se lo va a ofrecer a las dos generaciones más recientes. Lo vamos a tener en el aula de la sección de teoría de metodología de la ciencia, que como saben pues tiene más o menos como entre 20 y 25 lugares. Entonces sí es apropiado para estas dos generaciones. De las otras generaciones, bueno, algunos colegas, algunos muchachos ya nos han pedido, pero sí no podemos tener el acceso para todas las 5 generaciones, porque simplemente no van a caber. Y va a ser un taller en el sentido de que van a trabajar, o sea, Paola trae material para establecer una metodología basada en juegos de comunicación que les va a explicar con mucho detalle. Bueno, en este caso, Paola nos va a ofrecer este seminario, por favor.
Sí, voy a hablar en inglés, pero sí entiendo muy bien el castellano. Estuve aquí hace 30 años, por año y medio viví por aquí, en Morelia, Michoacán. Y son 30 años que no me vuelvo, entonces para mí es un placer estar aquí. Entonces voy a hablar inglés, pero ustedes saben que si después en la discusión quieren hablar en castellano, para mí está perfecto. Les agradezco mucho al Cinvestav, a Miguel Ángel, a Alejandro, para haberme invitado, porque sí, estar aquí para mí tiene también un sentido como privado, porque era muchas las personas que están en vuestro país. Además, mi primer hijo, tiene ciudadanía mexicana, porque también si los padres son italianos, se nació aquí, entonces tiene doble nacionalidad.
¿Cómo se llama?
Emiliano. Se llama Emiliano, que es un nombre bien italiano también, porque es un nombre italiano, no es más mexicano. Well, I try to switch to English, that will be quite difficult. So, first of all, I beg your pardon that because professionally it would be good to know to whom you are talking to, and I don't know exactly what are your interests, what are your knowledge, etc. And so my talk maybe will be a bit generic, or some of you will get bored, some of others won't understand what I'm talking about. So sorry about that, but of course we will keep a lot of time for discussion in order to understand better what you're interested for, all the things that I will tell you. I will speak more or less 1 hour. Sorry, but there is a lot of things to say. And okay, I thought that it would be good to present the science communications area in sort of in between a personal way and a field point of view, in the meaning that as I worked for 20 years in the field, my experience went through a lot of different situations and media and change in the practices in the science communication. So I will speak about what happened from the first models of science communication many years ago until now, and that's part of my story. It's not just a story of the field, it's my personal story. So I will bring maybe some of these changes in the way we do science communication are well known from you. For that reason, I will give you also some examples that are maybe more personal, more European in general, and more personal in particular, so that also if you know all this kind of changes in the science communication field, you can know something new, I hope so. This story, the story of the changes in science communication, of course, is not a linear story. There are no stories that are linear, in the meaning that in history, things changes with different velocity, in different way, in the different places. So what I will tell you is a story that is artificial, as nearly every story. So I will tell you what the changes in the way we think about science communication in Europe, and you can find these stories in papers, in books about science communication. But of course, that doesn't mean that in certain areas, in certain institutions or countries, the changes are different. Maybe something was done very early, and in other institutions, something is not done yet. Now, also the change exists. What is science communication? Science communication is a lot of stuff, and we will see that is a lot of different activities and has a lot of meaning. Science communication is when you have a newspaper that is presenting a new research. This is science communication. Science communication is a conference to people. Science communication are workshops for children, experiments, science museums, internet now. So it's a huge field, a very huge field that has different kinds of activities and practices. But all of that is about communicating science. It's about the links between the scientific community, mediators, journalists, and the public, different kinds of public. But we will see it's more complicated than that. In fact, we begin with the most simple example of science communication, that is a conference. That is the very beginning. Somebody, the scientist, that told to the others. It's not a bad thing. It's not a conference, okay, it can be a very interesting conference. But a conference, as we will see, is just the most simple and, for many reasons, not the most effective way to communicate science. Also, if in certain occasions, situations, it's okay. But from many years ago until now, a lot of different kind of activities to communicate science have been developed. So we will finish, in fact, we start with a first model, the simple model, I know science, I tell you, and you don't know, to a more complicated models of communication in science. That is exactly this kind of discussion games that I will present later, tomorrow, and after tomorrow in the workshops. So this is where we come and where we will go. The first word that expressed the communication of science was popularization of science. That is divulgación de la ciencia, is the same word in Spanish, or divulgazione scientifica in Italian. This is a word that, as we will see, we don't use so much now. It's okay, it's just a word, you know, word doesn't mean anything. It's are important for what you do, not how things are called. But popularization of science is a memory of the first model of science communication that we got. That is the one of the conference. That is the one of we call deficit model. What is a deficit model? There is a scientist the task, science, and there is the public in the market that don't know anything. And so communication, what means that the scientist has somehow to explain this story to the general public. And the deficit model means that there is a deficit of knowledge in the public, and the scientist is asked to fill this deficit. So the public don't know, and the scientist has to fill the gap, how to just give information to the public. This way of thinking about science.
I can't help myself. The French word is vulgarisation.
Vulgarisation. Vulgarisation de la ciencia.
Socialización.
Well, socialization is okay. Vulgarization, the popularization is to give to the pueblo, to the popular population. Anyhow, this is the first model, and it's the model that ran for years and years and years and years of work. And was still valid, more or less. It was not analyzed, but was still valid in the 80s. Not everywhere, not in all fields, but was valid. Which are the problems of the deficit model? The deficit model, first we'll see the implication that the people are ignorant and often hostile. The second is that the more the people get information, the more they will support the scientific community. This is another implication of this model. That the media normally are bad because they have a commercial agenda, and so they are not a bad way to communicate. And journalists are often ignorant when not hostile. These are the presuppositions of the deficit model. I know, you don't. And the more I tell you, the more you will support my science. We will see that is not true. Practically any of these statements are really true. And we will see also that sometimes when we work in this kind of framework, Marco, there is a gap between the intentions and the methods. Because it's a model that is poor. It's a poor model. It's not enough to understand what is going on in science communication. First of all, the people are not empty. The people, young people, senior people, whatever they have plenty of information already on science. From the schools, of course, but also from mass media. These are two of my favorite films, Alien and Blade Runner, and this is the Golem stories. The people has already, before the science arrived, a lot of the ideas about science that are connected with what they see. Now they see Big Bang Theory, they see series CSI, they see a lot of, and so the people is not empty. The people is not ignorant. If we say that the people is not a physicist, yes, okay. If you are not a physicist, you are not a physicist. If you are not an epidemiologist, you are not an epidemiologist. But the people is not empty. They have a lot of ideas. And I like this quote. It's a bit long, but I think it's nice. The scientific images that populate our head do not only take the shape of more or less approximate concepts, facts, notions, data. They also, and previously, exist in the ambiguous, contradictory, and very interesting form of stratified metaphors, symbols, dreams, fears that interact through osmosis and several exchanges. Before reading a textbook of a popular science or a popular science magazine, the common individual builds his/her representation of science and scientists by sniffing it, more or less consciously, in soap operas, in films, in figurative arts, in music, in all different kind of media. So, people have not only knowledge, and that's very important, they can know or cannot know what is the DNA, but also attitudes. I don't trust scientists. Emotions, I'm afraid about biotechnology, and needs, I would like to know more about epidemiology, because I'm afraid. And so when you do work in science communication, you should tackle all this kind of stuff. And please remember that knowledge of different levels in all kind of social stratus is not that somebody know or doesn't know what is a DNA. I know something about DNA, a genetist knows something about the DNA, a medicine doctor knows something about the DNA, a physicist knows something about DNA. So the knowledge already is not just yes and no, it's not black and white. But also, apart from knowledge, we have a lot of other stuff that are knowledge, we will see, sort of. They are in our mind. If you don't look at this kind of context that is so broad, you can make errors. For example, Einstein. Einstein, as an ambassador of science that is used all around the world, I don't know, in Mexico, is a very, very bad idea.
Oh, you just skip it. It is.
It's a bad
so
idea.
Interesting, no?
It's a bad idea. Why it's a bad idea? Did you organize a science festival for children and there is Einstein's in the posters, Einstein everywhere? Because he's exactly the math scientist. So you are just confirming what the children, for example, think. That is a scientist, a male, is old, is a bit crazy, is a genius, and so is not like me. And so how girls, for example, can identify herself, how girls can identify themselves in Einstein, but also how a boy that is not so good in mathematics can identify himself or can say, oh yes, I want to become a mathematician. If the model is Einstein, is not a good model. But so the people is not happy. Second assumption that is incorrect, that the people don't trust scientists. It's not true. These are the results of the Eurobarometer surveys. I don't know if you know what is a Eurobarometer survey. The European Commission every year run massive surveys on all the European countries and trying to understand the attitudes of people about different kinds of stuff, from the European Union as a political unity to the science, technology, environment, etc. This is, for example, our data from a Eurobarometer that was specialized in analyzing what the people think about science and scientists. And you can download, a very important stuff. I haven't put in my slide all the reference to the book, articles, papers, whatever, that support what I'm saying. It's not just my ideas, it's a collective work of reflections. But if you are interested, I can give you the bibliography at any time, any moment. Also, if you are interested in particular things that I'm saying. And the Eurobarometer surveys are downloadable from the European Commission website. And so you can look at the very interesting data about what the public perception of science in Europe, of course. And so you can see clearly that when it's about trusting, the scientists working in public research institutes have the highest rating. So the people trust scientists. It's not true that they don't try scientists. They try. They trust scientists a lot. A bit less the one who work in private companies. So, coming back to our conference. If the people has a diversity of opinion, diversity of needs, emotion, blah, 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 is a conference the best way to communicate science? No. For many, many reasons. Because not all the people will come only the people that is interested. And also, the conference is not a way to tackle emotions, fears, previous knowledge that are so important. So the fact is that if these kind of activities or other activities that are not conferences but answer to the deficit model are organized, let's say an exhibition in which there are a lot of panels with information about something, or workshops in which the mediator just tells a lot of information or demonstrate an experiment, etc., etc. If all these activities are organized, in fact, the impact on public opinion is not so strong. It's fine. I'm not saying please. I'm not saying that it's fine. I'm looking at the limits of the different kind of activities that you can organize.
Oh, sorry. But so we are wasting our time. It's not a conference.
Yeah, it's true. But you are interested. I hope so. That you are interested in what I say. For that reason, it's very important to leave a lot of space to discussion. That I hope I will do. For example, if I organize a conference on biotechnologies and some people come that are against biotechnology, some association, NGO, etc., that are against biotechnology, will I convince them to a conference? No, they will go out as they were coming. Well, but it's important that historically in the 90s, a lot of after an effort in Europe to communicate science following this kind of deficit model, after there was a lot of surveys on if the people changed or don't change their opinion. For example, biotechnology. I say biotechnology because it was a case. Because there was a lot of fear against biotechnology. There was a lot of information given, and then after they will say, well, okay, what is changed? Something is changed. What happens is, no, it's not true. The more info you give and more support you receive. In fact, there is another survey that I like very much. There is an international group that is called ROSE, the Relevance of Science Education, and they are working, distributing the same kind of survey all around the world, in many countries of the world, trying to understand what secondary schools pupils, we are speaking about teenagers, think about science. And what we will see is quite unexpected, because you can read that like that. 2.5 is the average. Toward 4 is interest, is the value increases. Toward 1, the value decreases. Blue are the male, white are the female. And the question was, would you like to be a scientist? That was the question of this questionnaire. And what you will see is incredibly Sweden, Iceland, Finland, Japan, a lot of countries in which supposedly there is a lot of knowledge about science, a lot of magazines about science, there is a lot of technology around, like in Japan. And so, where the information about science is so strong and the presence of science technology is strong, the children don't want to be scientists. And instead, in Uganda, or sorry, I cannot read without spectacles, or Switzerland, Ghana, or whatever, in country in which supposedly there is less strong the presence of technology and science, the secondary school pupil says, yes, we want to be scientists. So there is something wrong here. It's not here? Sorry?
I don't find it surprising, because in the poor countries, the scientists will have a lot more money to earn. And so it might be a factor there, because they have another vision of what they can do if they are scientists.
No, it's not that, well, we can skip that on the discussion. Remember that we will discuss that point. But it's not like that. Is the problem because there are other kind of professions that they have so much more money than scientists, like doctors and whatever, engineers, etc. The problem is that the people feel that science is important for the development of their country. And so they have an expectation that technology will solve their own problem. Just that, and then we speak about it.
Do you have some information about Mexico in this kind of?
No, I don't think so.
Oh.
I don't think so. But we can check, because in the ROSE website, all the data are available, and so you can look for data.
Thank you.
So anyhow, you will see it's not so true that if you are surrounded by science, or maybe it's also true that there are economical reasons, expectations, there are other consideration that is not just knowledge. And to go more about that, do the people don't know anything about science? It's not true. Let's think about medicine. Why do people on the bus chat about cholesterol? I don't know, the people is always all the time chatting about my bad cholesterol, your low cholesterol, I did a MMA, and I was whatever it is. They have such a complicated language and lexicon on medicine. Why? Why they speak about that? Because it's relevant. Because it's relevant for them. And so the people take a lot of time and effort to understand medicine because it's relevant. And so we have other two key words in order to understand communication of science. That is motivation. Why I should know something about DNA, if I know my paper. And relevance. How much is relevant for me? That are, of course, they are linked. And so I can study a lot and read. For example, now the people is going Googling, isn't that they are Googling all the time about medicine. If they have a cold, they go and look for a lot of information. So they are studying medicine. Of course, they won't become a doctor, but they are studying medicine. In fact, if we come from the Eurobarometer survey again, there was a question, if you are not, the majority of the people, I will just summarize for you, tell we are very much interested in science. We want to know more about science and technology. And if, for the people who asked it, who said no, the question was, if you are not at all interested in new invention, technology, etc., why? And the answer was, I don't understand, the first, okay, they don't understand. But the second was, I don't care about it. Why should I care? And so the first thing is, why should people care about science? If we don't work on that, we won't have the people that we want in a conference. We will have in a conference only the people that are already sort of interested, but we won't have the people who are not in principle. We have to motivate them. We have to understand what they want, what they think, what they expect, what is the relevance of science for themselves. So, let's speak quickly about the bad journalism. Well, of course there is bad journalism. Of course there are journalists that are bad, of course there are commercial newspapers, etc. But also in that respect, the world is so much more complicated. There are also the rules of communications, the rules of media. Every media has its own rules. And you cannot go, you can have a better communication. So we are running a master in science communication. We are preparing the science journalists of, well, we have been running for 20 years, and so we already have our journalists in radio, TV, etc. So I believe that they have to be prepared and trained. But it's also true that scientists mostly, they have to understand that there are rules of communication. For example, there is this fantastic abstract. Of course, this is quite difficult to understand for anybody who is not an astrophysicist. Okay? And this is what happened to the BBC. It's the same. This is the new, in scientific term. This is the BBC. And the BBC, what is the title of the BBC? First, no, this is blah, blah, blah. I don't know if you want to read, but I don't think many of you can understand. This is what the BBC says. First known supernova laid bare. Space telescope unraveled, oh sorry, I cannot read that. Unraveled the mystery of a gigantic, fast-growing supernova that was first recorded by Chinese astronomers nearly 20,000 years ago. And so, of course, what is interesting for people, that something is new, that something was a mystery and was solved, that something was seen 2,000 years ago by the Chinese. It's so interesting. So, you see, here there are a lot of elements of interest for the public that were not in the abstract. In that case, this is not a simplification of the news. It's not that I take that and I just simplify what is written. I put this research in a context of interest of the normal people, the people that are not astrophysicists. So, to communicate is not to simplify, is to put into the context. And this is not bad journalism, this is good journalism, this is the BBC. That is doing a lot of work on science communication, by the way. This is another example, hormonal responses different when playing violin, blah, blah, blah. Also, that is very complicated. It's about measuring hormones and in people who play, this kind of games on the computer games. Okay, and this is what happened on the press, what was written on the press. Unreal Hormones may treat games as social competitions. The next time your girlfriend, wife, or mother complains about all the time you spend playing PC3 or online games, you can tell her that your attraction to video games may actually be a byproduct of evolution. Scientists at the University of Missouri, blah, 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 blah. So, again, that is something that the deficit model don't take into account. They say, why they don't publish my research in a newspaper? Because in order to be published in a newspaper, the research has to be contextualized and needs some features that are not in the original abstracts. New features that is not simplified, is to contextualize the information. So, in order to be effective communication has to tackle previous knowledge, yes, of course, but also previous attitudes, refuse, fear, expectation, motivation, relevance, so which is the relevance to the personal people, and self-perception. For example, if I am, unfortunately, many women my age, 50 women, they don't think that science and technology are for themselves. It's a self-perception. Well, the one that works in science, of course, but the other one, they say, well, I'm just a grandmother, you know, science is not for me. And so to speak with the women 50, in the day 50, you have to understand that there is a strong barrier that is the self-perception. Science is not for me. And in order to communicate, you have to jump this barrier. And again, we have to consider that the media is the message. So, what is the problems of the deficit model? Do not always subtract because fail to be relevant. Often is not effective because do not take into account the previous knowledge in that broad sense. Cannot convince because do not tackle audience's opinions, fear, expectation, fear, blah, blah, blah. So, which was the second model that was used in the beginning from the 90s? What we call the public engagement in science and technology. What means to engage? Well, that means that for the beginning, the audience has not to be passive, the audience has to be active, the audience has to participate, sort of, and has to have personal experience. Because if I'm a 50 grandmother, and I think that the science is not for me, if I do a bit of science with a scientist, for example, etc., maybe I will change my self-perception. And changing my self-perception, I will go and have more interest and read something and listen something, blah, blah, blah. So, for example, public engagements of science typically represented by science centers, interactive museums. In interactive museums, people are not just listening in a passive way, but they ask it to be proactive and have personal experience. A small parenthesis, maybe you already know that, but we have to make now clear that when we are speaking about science communication, we are speaking about informal learning, not about formal learning. What is formal learning? If I have to become a mathematician, I have to study school, and then a college, and then a maestria, and then a PhD, etc. I have to follow a formal path that will give me a bunch of information that are ordered, linearly ordered, and I have to be controlled, checked, etc., etc. In this informal learning context, like science museum, I won't become a mathematician. If we expect that we become mathematician in the science centers, we are equivocated. In a science center, I can have experience that change my attitude, for example, about mathematics. Wow, mathematics is funny. And, or I want to know more about that. Or me too, I thought that I was totally stupid in mathematics. I can do something in mathematics, that's fine. That's so fine. That's so important for young people. Because mathematics, in all the research, is the, how can I say, we say the black beast of sciences. And so I'm not good in mathematics, I want to become a scientist. Also science is so much more. And another consideration that in this framework of the engagement, the public engagement of science, our understanding of learning is so much more complex than not learning facts and data. Learning in a informal learning context includes 5 different areas. There are different models, but I like that one. To learn something signifying to learn knowledge and understanding, yes, but also skills. For example, I used for the first time a microscope, or attitude and value. I changed it. I was afraid of biotechnology. Now I don't know. I'm more interested. I want to discuss more about that. It's just to enjoy, to be creativity, to express yourself, and it is also to change activity and behavior. For example, now I know that I like mathematics. Maybe I will look more for mathematics. I'm a young girl. I thought that mathematics was not for me. Now I change my mind and I want to know more about mathematics.
Paola, what's the difference with, say, cooking?
With what?
Cooking.
What cooking?
Cooking.
Cooking.
To cook. I mean, I need some knowledge and understanding. I need some skills.
Yeah, absolutely. These are not just for science. These are the definition of learning in any kind of domain. Also, learn to cook has the same stuff. There are things that you know. There are skills. There are attitude. I think that cooking is very nice, or I don't think so, etc., etc. I enjoy myself. I'm creative, or I just following recipes. Absolutely, it's identical. Cooking or physics is the same in that respect. Yeah, there are different sort of learning dimension. Let's say like that, dimensions of learning. But also the engagement paradigm, the engagement model, has some problems. Which are the problems? For example, there is a prejudice that interactivities is only for children. Okay, science center, it's okay, it's fine, but it's not for me. It's something for children. There is a problem, a big problem that still is one of the biggest problems in science communication in the world, that is social inclusion. I can do the most fantastic activity, but if some people don't come for any reason, well, I'm not speaking to everybody. There is a point there. And the social inclusion is one of the first agenda of many of the people who work in science communication. How can I have in this place the people that is not there, never come here, and maybe they won't come here? And another very important thing is how to present current and finishing science. Sorry, it's missing a word, science. It has, of course, I can do a lot of interactivity about basic physics, for example, angular momentum, I don't know, waves, I don't know, etc. But how can I express in this way current science, what we still don't know? And then, very important, how to present the links between science, society, nature, economic development, and what we are doing here. By the way, I'm very happy to be here because I think that your program of postdoc is absolutely so interesting. And I think that there is a lot of need of people like you in the world, because you have the person that have to work in the link between science, society, nature, economic development, blah, blah, blah. And this is, I think, is very important. But this is science communication too. It's very important for science communication. The public engagement of science is not sufficient. Also, of course, also the adults can play in the science center, and there are a lot of activity also for adults. And this is something that Science Museum began to do since many years ago. Let's use as an example La Villette. La Villette, la Cité des Sciences et des Industries, is the science center in Paris. It's huge, and it's made like a commercial shopping mall. Do you see? It's like a shopping mall. But this is not an error. This is by purpose. Because what happens? That you want to, you want to have the people that can follow their interest, their motivation, they can move freely inside this place and choose what they want. This is exactly what do you do in a shopping mall. You go there, you go around, you choose the shops, you go there because you're interested in there, If you are not interested in shoes, you go for food, etc. And the idea of the La Villette, that is huge, is a huge building, is exactly the people will feel free inside our museums like in a shopping mall, and they will follow their own interest. For example, there are exhibitions like that one that was fantastic. I cannot talk about that. It was an exhibition about shadows, light and shadows, only for children. And there were very few words and a lot of interacting on things to do, like, for example, to play with shadows. And of course, this is for families. And so I'm a families. I found what I want inside the museum. Or, now recently there was an exhibition about economics. And of course, this is not a place in which the families will go. It's a place in which young people, like that one, the 25, 20-something, they will go because they are interested to understand economics. And so the museums sort of offer different kind of languages and styles and in topics to different publics, in order to meet this expectation, motivation, relevance, blah, 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 that every kind of people has. But that's not enough. Still not enough. We need something more. Oh, everything is good, but we need something more. Why we need something more? Already we have seen a bit. Because there are these kind of problems like Ritalin, the use of Ritalin or in vitro fertilizations. So there are questions in our society that are very important, that are very complicated, because to solve this question, to have an answer to the question, you need scientific knowledge, of course, but you have to need also governmental knowledge, so administration, let's say, strategies. You have ethics problems. You have the society is not a block, is not unified on this kind of problem, because you can have religious aptitudes or not religious aptitude, etc., etc. And so the public engagement of science has to jump to another step. That is the public participation in science and technology. That's something we are discussing in the last, I don't know, well, it's difficult to say, 15 years, 10 years, something like that. We had a referendum on in vitro fertilization policies in Italy. All the citizens had to vote. It was a disaster, a total disaster, because the law was horrible. It was a law in which all the scientists say, "Oh my God, this is from a scientific point of view, is just a disaster," because they imply methodology that are absolutely anti-scientific, that can damage the woman and the children, etc., from a scientific point of view. And they were so angry, the scientific community was so angry that there was a referendum, because they defend themselves. No, we know what it's about. How can you vote this stuff that is, has no scientific meaning? And the people, the citizens, of course, they were absolutely not prepared to vote something like that. There was not any kind of communication before the votes. And the people more or less get angry against the scientists, because they say, "Ha, you want to do what you want, but I want to decide by myself." And so at the end, we have a law that is just horrible.
This is a biased example. I mean, these are the same people that voted for Berlusconi.
No, it's not true. There is a lot of people that just didn't vote or vote against scientific community, but just because they were angry about the attitude of the scientific community that was just shocked about what was happening, and it was not able to communicate. But anyhow, it's a problem of an opportunity to have such a problem. I just mentioned it too, but we have a lot of lists, the alternative energies, nuclear energy, whatever you want. We have such a list of
We
all.
cannot use Italy. Italy is a country where scientists,
No, this is not what-
technologists were put on trial because they failed to predict
Yeah, but this is also more
an earthquake. System.
No, that was more complicated than that, unfortunately. It was more complicated. I can tell you after in the discussion. Anyhow, it's a problem of an opportunity. It's an opportunity because, as we say, I will say it, if something is relevant for the person, they will put energy on study, on learning, on understanding. Therefore, if there are questions that matter for the people, like energy, like health, like whatever, that's an opportunity to really reach these people. Everybody, because this is about everybody. In vitro fertilization is a problem for everybody, energy is a problem for everybody, etc. And so the idea is that we have to switch from an idea that is mere scientific literacy, also we are working for improving the scientific literacy, to an idea of scientific citizenship, that every citizen should somehow, in order, let's say that in another way, in order to be a good citizen, you have also to participate to the debate of science and technology and learn about science and technology. Or better, scientific literacy and scientific citizenship have to work together. I'm not just learning what is the DNA, I also have to understand what is in vitro fertilization. If not, I'm not a good citizen. I'm not a citizen 100%. If I don't understand alternative energies, I'm not a good citizen. Because this is our future. This is where we are going to. So what did the community? There are many kinds of things that we can do in order to make the people participate. So to jump another step in the science communication. For example, this is a very simple example. That is the Science Museum London, and years ago they organized an exhibition that was called very cheap. That was not a lot of money. Very cheap exhibition. The idea is Future Foods was the title, and the question is. No, there is not a question here. Well, is will genetic modified objects, it's not written, will genetic modified organisms solve the problem of the famine in the world? That was the question. It's an open question. Who was the answer? Nobody. No? There is no answer now. A scientific answer with data about that? We don't know. There are a lot of data, discussions, experiments, research is still ongoing, etc., etc. So this exhibition was very open. There was two walls. One wall was about all the data and information and what it knows about. For the answer, yes, GMO can help to solve the famine in the world. And the other side, the other wall was about no. There are other data or considered. It's not exactly yes and no. It's more complicated. But for example, we can use the typical arguments. From one side, you say I can produce an organism that is resistant to a virus or a bacteria or whatever, parasites. And the other side, you say okay, but there are natural ways to produce an organism that is, etc., etc. And so the exhibition was made like that, with two walls, with two different points of view. And at the end, the visitors could join the GMO debates and write their own thinking or vote some survey, etc. This is interesting if you think about, because it's also the way to collect public opinion. It's not just a way to make the people participate, but you collect also public opinion in a museum. And in this kind of, we call it discussion exhibits. And some exhibits are the ones that you can find like in Universal, you can make experiments. These are discussion exhibits in which the most important things that they foster the discussion about the topic. For example, should police use flying CCTV? This is a very interesting question. There are pro, contra, we are on six, please.
You don't mention competitive currents. For instance, like massive propaganda of sport games in radio, in TV, in newspapers, which looks like deliberate intent to keep some levels of idiocy in human societies. And that's strong.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. But there is also, I have no time to go through that, also I'm quite late. But for example, there are museums that try to compete to sports. For example, in the Science Museum London, the last Friday every month, it's open until 11 o'clock p.m. And it's free, and there are a lot of events inside, and they sell beers. And so the problem is, should I go to the pub, or should I go to the Science Museum? It's funny. First of all, it's more funny to go to the Science Museum because there are a lot of more things to do. Secondly, there are much more girls or boys, depending on your interest. Because in a pub you have 20, and there you have 3,000. I was in a night, there was 5,000 young people in the Science Museum in London. There was a queue outside, like in the Lenin Mausoleum. And the people go, the young people go there, drink beer, met other friends, etc. And so they are trying to compete. Because you are right, we have to compete with other offers. If not, we don't get. Anyhow, this is another example. It's a very small, cheap exhibition we did in Italy. It's about water, because it's in a water mill, a paper mill, sorry. And at the end, the public could choose or did debates about some questions like, what are you ready to give up to save water? The public fountains, the English laws, you know the laws with the English. In Italy it's not so easy to have lawns so beautiful and green, like in Central Park, you know, in the Hyde Park. And so, we have no water for everybody. What you are ready to give up? Your piscines, your public fountains, etc. And so this exhibition to try to put the discussion, make the people participate on fact that are not a simple questions. But I love to see the people discussing about that, because they, at that point, incredibly, they need science. Because the people with whom I work, for example, as a facilitator on these topics, they try to understand how much water consume my piscine, my alberca, my swimming pool. How much water it consumes my swimming pool, how much water it consumes a public fountain, how much water I have to use to have a green lawn. And so I cannot answer this question without a bit of scientific knowledge, data. And it's the same time the same stuff when you make the people debates about in vitro fertilization. There is a moment in which the people say, okay, but how safe is these procedures? Or what happens if, the science can. Also, if you begin with a sociological approach, at the end, the science is important, the knowledge is important. Well, this is about to make people participate. What we can do about social inclusion, well, this is still open. Of course, to include community, different community in your work is important. For example, this is an explainer, a guide of the Science Museum London. She comes from a Muslim community. Muslim community often are isolated from science and technology. If you have inside guides, people that work with you, people that develop exhibition that comes from a Muslim community, they will come more willingly. They will recognize themselves. The museum is not for white people only, WASPs. The museum is also for Muslims. Other ways is that, yes, to compete, as you say, to compete with other offers. For example, this is the Trinity, the Science Gallery of the Trinity College in Dublin, and they are fantastic. They have a very small place, but they do, wow, very trendy exhibitions that are targeted to the young people, because this is important. If you know which is your audience, you have to target this audience. You cannot speak to 7 years old and a 17 years old in the same way, or better. You cannot have the image that go well with both. Maybe you can organize an experiment, an experience that is good for both. But if my Science Museum visitors that are with the beer, they see a lot of families, they will go to the pub because they want to stay among themselves. And so you have to understand who you are targeting. In that case, they organize very challenging, provocative exhibition. For example, there was an exhibition about infectious diseases. And they target for young people. They put together, before organizing the exhibition, they open a call for proposals in which artists and scientists work together. And together, they have an idea of an exhibit. And then the exhibition is made by different groups of artists and scientists that work together and propose something. Let's see, for example, what happened. That was the title, Infectious, Stay Away. Of course, everybody went there because it was very provocative. And this is an example that I loved of an exhibit that was invented by scientists and artists. All the visitors, when they enter in the exhibition, had to kiss a plate, how do you call it? Agar, yes, a petri plate. I had to call a petri plate. Then all the plates were on the walls, and they become flourishing with bacteria. And the message was, we live with microorganisms. It's not that microorganisms are just bad. Microorganisms are everywhere. They are bad and good in all our kisses. It's plenty of microorganisms. So it was a very provocative way to, for example, that way to change the opinion that is normally that people say, microorganisms are bad, normally I'm clean. No, I'm not clean. And another one, it was pay attention, donate your brain to science. And all the visitors were involved in live experiment of neurosciences, cognitive science and neuroscience. And of course, in this exhibition, the scientists were there, but in a very informal and interesting and provocative and funny and merry way, and so they could speak with the people. Because this is, for example, it looks like a conference, but it's not exactly like a conference. This is our meetings with scientists that you can organize, in which it's so informal and so the scientists know that they have to make the people speak more than how he or she will speak. And so you can organize this kind of meeting. The Natural History Museum in London, they have 400 researchers, because it's one of the research institutes on biodiversity, the biggest in the world. And every day they have a scientist that is go in the arena and meet the public and try to speak what is or she's working for. So it's not a lesson on general topics like what is biodiversity, but it's about I'm working in that way. For example, I'm developing, I assisted to that, barcodes to use to very quickly identify what is in the garden, which kind of plants are in the garden. And so he was explaining this kind of research, and the people would say, well, why do you do that? How do you do that? Well, it's important, blah, blah, blah. Apart from all these activities that are very funny and nice, there are other kind of methods that are more strong to support participation of the public, that are called participatory methods. Many of you probably already know them, because if you work with government, administration, etc., there are ways to consult the public that sometimes use this kind of method. And yeah, I will give you just shortly some idea what they are. And these are participatory methods that can be used in museums, but also in research institutes, in science festivals, open days, wherever you are working. For example, Science Cafe, but a Science Cafe that has to be a real Science Cafe. I don't know if you know what is a Science Cafe. No? Science Cafe is to bring science in a cafe, literally. You have a cafe, a bar, a pub, and you bring the scientists to the bar. Because if the people don't come to you, you come to people in pubs, or in bars in Italy, or in cafe in France. And the problem is that when the scientists go there, you have not to reproduce the conference style, because this is something happen. I go in a bar and I give you 1 hour conference of DNA, and all the people, why I choose this bar and not the other one. But you can use other ways to make the discussion easier, and I will tell you later a bit about that. For example, with discussion games, role plays, focus groups, the way in which method in which you really support the public to participate, to express themselves. This is, for example, a science cafe that we organized in Cagliari, in Sardinia, in Italy. And this was in order to make the public meet the people to work there in the astronomical observatory. And there is an astronomical observatory, and then they are building up a radio telescopes, a very new big one, radio telescope, that will be in Italy the biggest one. And so this idea was to make people meet these astronomers and astrophysicists. And what we have done, at the beginning, the astronomers and the astrophysicists, they were present, they just shut down. They were in the coffee, sitting down at the other one. And we began with the discussion games. So the people have research topics in small cards. This is a discussion game. Tomorrow we will work more on that. For example, in a card was written to discover, these research topics were not invented by us, but were the astrophysicists that suggested to us, of course. And so one was, for example, we want to, I don't know exactly the language in which they were written, but let's say a few lines. One was about looking for other extraterrestrial life. Another one was to understanding first minutes of the Big Bang. Another one was about understanding dark matter. Another one was, the things it was explained. And so the people asked to discuss among themselves what they would like to know more about, what for them was more important. And so they had to put in order these cards in their own way. And then at the end, the facilitators say, okay, what this group says, and the group says, we discussed that it is more important that, or we are more interested in that, etc., etc. And then the other group, and then the way where the public was presenting their own opinion, ideas, expectation, etc., etc. At that point, the astrophysicists were speaking and saying, well, I personally, I find more interest in that because blah, blah, blah. And then the discussion followed, and so there was a very live way of exchanging. But this make the people speak before helped also the scientists to understand which were the interests and the knowledge and the whatever of the people that were discussing.
Can you bet money?
No money, no money. But everybody drink and have a nice time. There is another method that is more complicated. It's called the decide. More or less, the idea is the same. You have cards. We will play for this about decide tomorrow. And what is interesting in decide, it is it takes 1 hour and a half. The discussion is quite demanding because you have a lot of facts. It's not just about what do you think, but also you are provided with facts and stimulus of knowledge, and the public discuss using these facts and learning a lot. And at the end, they have to vote. This is not about science only, but about policy that regards science. For example, policy that regard HIV. Should the people who are transfer the HIV to another one go to jail or not? You know that there are countries in which that exists, countries in which that not exist. And so the discussion was about in vitro fertilization again, or etc. This got xenotransplantation, which is the limit that you accept of transplant, that you will be transplanted with something that is xeno. And at the end, the people vote. What is interesting that all the votes of all these people playing all around the world, Europe, because they have also the world, because it was quite a spread and still use this method, go online so you can also see what the people think in the different countries on particular policy that have to do with science and technology. And that's interesting because, of course, these are not scientific data because the samples are biased. So you want to play, it's not that everybody, it's not like Eurobarometer is a proper investigation. This is not a proper investigation. But anyhow, it's interesting to know the trends. So the discussion games can be deliberative and not deliberative. There are some discussion games that are just to open the discussion on something and something which you want. Very quickly, two last examples, just to give you an idea what it means. Let the people participate at what we call youth journalism. So we make the young people become science journalists, because this is a way to help them to develop their interest and their expectation and to learn what they want. Because what is a journalist? A journalist is somebody who will learn, who will explore, who investigate, who is curious, who want to know. And so if we let the young people be journalists, they will be so attracted and so happy. They will discover a lot of things. But so much, in a way, so much different from what happened in a classroom. Totally different. So we did 2 experiments. There were also experiments of social inclusion. One is Iota Primordiale, that is a science magazine that was designed and realized with the help of a graphic designer, but they decided everything, by children 9, 12 years old. We worked in children's centers in the town that are free places in which all kinds of children go, in order not to have only the rich children. And what was interesting that the children were volunteered to work on that. And many of them, they were not particularly interested in science, but they were particularly interested in journalism, because they love it. They love to go around with a microphone, they love to be, and things like that. So that was the hook. But then they did everything. These are our small journalists. What we discovered that they are journalists, natural journalists. They are so good in good journalism. And they are so interesting in a lot of things, and we went with them, following their interest, looking discovering the scientific institutions in the town of Trieste, and they were asking questions by themselves. We didn't tell them anything, and so they were asking, "What do you do?" I'm a genetist, and what are you studying? What are you studying for? This was a key question that they did to have all the science. What are you studying that for? And that is the relevance that we were talking about. So, what is interesting also that doing this kind of experience, you understand that they know a lot of stuff that you don't know they know. So the school, at that point, is 9 years old, this small child, and probably is just dealing with the table of Pythagoras table, or maybe is learning about the seeds and the flower that grow, etc. When we talk with them the first day, we tell them, what do you know about scientific institutions that work in Trieste? Nothing. Do you know that you have an international center for theoretical physics? No. Do you know the Reason Observatory? No, they don't know anything. See, what do you know? What do you listen about science recently? Neutrinos. Because it was the moment in which there were the neutrinos, the news about neutrinos going quicker. So they knew the word neutrinos. Who is answering these needs? Who is talking with them about neutrinos? They wanted to know. They are this, and we say, what do you know about neutrinos? Well, there is a place that is Gran Sasso, in which they are stronger. This was the explanation. They look for them because they are stronger. And then, of course, you can talk with them about that. So we brought them we have an accelerator, a synchrotron. We brought them there to speak about neutrinos with the scientists, and so it was very fun. Similar things, I will go very quickly now. We did some experiments with a science block designed and realized by 17, 18 years old teenagers. And they didn't know anything about science, but they wanted to understand dove mi butto. I don't know how to translate that in English. You know, we say dove mi butto if I don't know, if I have to choose a career or another one. I say dove mi butto, where I jump. Where I jump. So they decided that this was the titles of the blogs, and the blog is about where I jump. Is interesting chemistry, what happens about that, and so. And they work it, it's the same, they do interview, etc. So, to conclude very, very quickly, of course there are different levels of participation. There is a passive participation, I participate, I listen. There is a consultative participation, I want to know what you think. There is collaborative participations, that is like we work together, or there is people-led participation. In the case of the journals, with the young journalists, we try to go on, to let them, to leave them led. We were helping them, but they have to decide what to do, what to investigate, etc. So, of course, every activity is good. It's not that you have just to do people-led participation activity, but of course, it's interesting to understand that there are the participation. You can measure the participation of people, and you can also decide how far you can want to go to make the people participate. There are, of course, at the moment, some experiment in which citizens are really involved in the production of content, in the production of science, like in citizen science. This is the most advanced, let's say. It's not that you can do everything. You cannot involve citizens in string theory research. Well, of course, what I could do, but you can do that in other science. And so, for example, there is an example that is like in biodiversity. There are a lot of research institutes that involve citizens to look for species, or to decide which species to look, and to decide the relations between pollution and the presence of species in different environments, etc., etc. This is made by citizens and scientists together. Last example, with the decide key, the same discussion games that I presented you before. The European Association of Rare Diseases, they organized games on policy for rare diseases all around Europe with patients, doctors, and families of the patients. And then they brought all these results to the European Commission. They made a huge survey, and then they come to the European Commission saying, okay, we run, as the rare diseases, as you know, are quite rare, they could have a very good sample of what patients say and families of patients say. And so they came to the European Commission and said, we run a survey on which kind of policies they would like to have. These are the results. Okay, let's keep that one. Nice. So I think that the key word that I like very much is an English word that I know that you say, empoderecimiento. Empoderamiento. I think that's the right word, is that science communication is about empowering people. And so it's not just about communicate, but about helping the people to learn, helping the people to participate, helping the people to get interested. It's not just I won't tell you something, but it's just I want you to be active in science and technology, because it's important. If you are young people, I want to empower you so that maybe you choose a scientific career. If you are an adult or a senior, I want to empower you so that you can participate to the debates about the future of your nation and what we want about the future. And so, in order to empower people, we have sort of to think about different models of communication, in which the first one, that is one-way communication, is less far away from the empowerment, and provide experiences is already better, and establishing a dialogue is better, and make the people participate is better. That doesn't mean that all these levels are important. All is important, also the just one-way communication. And which are the receipts in order to follow this kind of model? In order to have a participatory model, we have to, first of all, know the audiences. And so we have to look for studies on public participation of perception of science. We have to use visitor studies, evaluation studies, so we have to know who are our audiences. And we have to understand how we can make these particular audiences that are all different to participate. And if needed, we have to go where the audiences are, because there are some audiences that won't come to you. And what you can do is to include the audiences in the design of activity. This is very important. For example, if I want to do something for the Muslim community in London, how can I develop a project for the Muslim community in London if I don't know anything about the Muslim community in London? I have to bring in my project ambassadors of this community, for example, and try to understand which kind of attitude they have, which kind of expectation, what they would like to know, etc., etc. So, that's all. These are ecologists, and you can imagine which kind of problem they have to communicate sounds as ecologists. It's just to make you understand if we work with oncologists, for example, or other kind of scientists. And of course, they cannot really communicate if they don't use all these kind of instruments, because they have to do a lot with fears, knowledge, etc., etc. Okay, that's all.
Preguntas. Bueno, se me olvidó hacer un comentario en la presentación que creo que sí va a ser de interés, no nada más para nuestro programa de STS, para los físicos. Paola trabaja también como en el grupo editorial que publica 2 revistas electrónicas. Una es GIGEM, Journal of High Energy Physics, que es una de las revistas con el mayor factor de impacto en el área de altas energías, pero para nuestro programa también publican GSCOM, Journal of Science Communication. Entonces, para varios de nuestros estudiantes que les interesa mucho el aspecto de comunicación de la ciencia, yo creo que hacer un poco de conversación con Paola puede ayudar. Qué tipo de cosas publican en esta revista, yo creo que también va a ser útil.
Y además publicamos en inglés y en la lengua original, o sea que ustedes pudieran publicar en castellano y en inglés, así que el artículo que puede ser leído para... Sí, nosotros tenemos también el JCOM, Journal of Cosmology and Astrophysics, JINST, Journal of Instrumentation, and JSTAT, Journal of Mechanical Statistics. No, pero no.
Bueno, ahora sí, preguntas, José.
Bueno, ya hemos visto lo que se ha hecho con la comunidad en general, ¿no? O sea, con la población en general, pero no sé qué se haya hecho, por ejemplo, en términos de hacer esa conexión con el sector privado, o sea, con la industria, ¿no? Con empresas de orden transnacional o multinacional, o sea, o localmente.
No, I have no experience in the communication toward industry. Sometimes industries with you. For example, in the case of the rare diseases, in this European project, the pharmaceutical industries work together. In the meaning that, of course, it is relevant also for them how and which kind of policy you will. And so I have experience in actions in which the industries work with you for some kind of projects, because they are interested in, for example, now many industries are interested in innovation and in foster the innovation culture in young people, and so they support maybe European projects that have to foster innovation and creativity. There is also this kind of movement of the maker movement, and now everybody wants to do maker movements in Europe, and this is sometimes you can work with the industry. I have a bit more experience in the communication toward policymakers, because I was involved in the training courses for scientists about how to communicate to policymakers their research. And there, in that case, the European Commission had certain lines. For example, all European funded projects have research, science projects, have to deliver policy brief to policymakers. you cannot have funding by the European Commission if at the end you have not a policy brief for policy making. Of course, not in the basic sciences, but in all the sciences that have any kind of application, or social sciences, or economics, etc. They fund you, but you have to communicate it. So I have experience in that. Yes.
Por ejemplo,
Okay.
hay conexión entre ciencia y empresa.
Sí, but not in communication. For example, Ricardo Illy is a sponsor. Illy is from my town. He's a family of my town. They sponsor activity in science communication. But I think that what you were mentioning is different. How do you communicate from the science community toward the industry? I don't know. It's not my thing.
Eugenio.
Well, would you prefer the questions in English or in Spanish, or
It's the same.
you understand the questions in Spanish?
Sí, lo entiendo muy bien. Ahora estoy en el mood, English mood, pero puedo intentarme cambiar de contestar en castellano.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias por una presentación que mostró muchos enfoques distintos que están teniendo lugar para comunicar los contenidos de la ciencia al público, ¿no? Para incrementar esto que en inglés se llama Public Understanding of Science, que es crucial, ¿no? en la sociedad tecnológica. Pero no escuché mucho acerca de otro aspecto que es importantísimo, que es acerca de precisamente la importancia de la ciencia. No los contenidos, no tanto saber de las disciplinas, es decir, la química, o la biología, o los nuevos desarrollos en física, sino cuál es la importancia que puede tener la ciencia como agente de cambio, para bien y para mal. ¿Cuál es la importancia que ha tenido a nivel histórico, a nivel nacional? ¿Por qué los centros de producción científica, los principales, se van moviendo geográficamente? ¿De qué dependen esos cambios? Por ejemplo, en el caso de Italia, que se ha mencionado en varias ocasiones, Italia a principios del siglo XIX tenían el liderazgo completo en dos grandes cosas que estaban vinculadas. Una es el desarrollo de la electricidad, el darle realmente a la fuerza eléctrica un sentido utilitario. Estaban arrancando con eso. Y por otro lado también en fisiología, en neurofisiología. Y ese liderazgo después se perdió, pasó a otro lado. La ciencia era mayoritariamente europea durante el siglo XIX, y hacia mediados del siglo XX el centro de la producción científica se mudó. No desapareció en Europa, pero ya no estaba el centro ahí. Entonces, ese tipo de educación acerca de la importancia que tiene la ciencia, ¿en dónde se encuentra en estos museos?
En todos se encuentra, en todas las actividades de comunicación de la ciencia hay este aspecto. El problema es que tienen distintos, ¿cómo se puede decir? A veces hay distintos enfoques. Por ejemplo, cuando se hace una comunicación de la ciencia que es sobre experimentos, por ejemplo, o conocer la natura, o conocer esas cosas, o también entender matemática, entender unas cosas que pensabas que no podías entender. Ahí estás vendiendo la ciencia como el placer como un placer cultural, como un placer mental, como un placer humano, que no se puede, que es horrible si la gente no tiene ese placer, porque es un placer, es una manera de vivir que tienes que necesitar. Del otro lado, cuando vamos a hacer una comunicación sobre esos problemas como la energía o la medicina, etc., lo que para mí es muy importante es que la gente descubre naturalmente que es importante la ciencia, porque se pone un problema y ve que no tiene demasiada o suficiente información y que no tienen suficiente conocimientos para hablar de eso, entonces descubren que sin ciencia y tecnología no puedes hablar casi de nada en la vida de nuestras sociedades. Entonces ellos los descubren un poco como en un efecto colateral, porque si a la gente le dices, la ciencia es importante, ellos dicen, bueno, está bien, no me interesa. Sí, es muy importante, ellos dicen, muy importante, pero a mí no me toca. Si al revés ellos hacen algo, descubren que sin datos epidemiológicos o cualquier tipo de dato natural sobre la polución, etc., no pueden decidir, dicen, wow, I need science.
Sí, a nivel individual, pero digamos a nivel colectivo, por ejemplo, las políticas de apoyo a la ciencia a nivel de los países, ¿qué tan importantes son desde el punto de vista del desarrollo de la sociedad, del desarrollo
el problema es que,
de las comunidades?
El problema es que no hay un único público, hay muchos públicos distintos y si hay que hablar distintamente en todos los públicos. O sea, lo que va a convencer una señora no va a convencer a un niño, no va a convencer el político. Porque el problema es, claro que al final queremos que haya muchos recursos para la ciencia y la tecnología y eso lo pueden dar nada más los gobiernos o los organismos intragubernamentales. Pero ahí el problema es hablar los políticos, no hablar. Ellos no dicen, muy buena onda esas cosas que hacen con los festivales de la ciencia. Bueno, me interesa.
Daniela, Liliana.
Dr. Paola, thank you for the seminar of today. My question is about the slide that it showed the results about a survey in where we can see the countries which has which has people interested in science, to be scientists, to become scientists. It caught my attention when I saw India. India, certainly, it's considered a newly industrialized country which has a high demographic profile all around the world, especially students. However, this country is still facing problems like poverty, terrorism, corruption. In your opinion, what could be the principal motivations, relevance, cells that encourage children of this country to get closer to science?
I don't know. I should be there to answer, and I never visited India. But I spoke with young researcher, Indian researcher coming from India, and what I found is that I gave courses for science communication with 2 international audiences. I had theoretical physicists, young theoretical physicists, PhD students or postdocs in theoretical physics. And they came from India, Brazil, USA, Europe, everywhere. And what I found that the PhD students from developed country, let's call like that also the distinctions now is not as it was before, it's a bit more complicated. But let's say traditionally developed country, they were really not interested, if not to communicate their own research in the purposes of the career. I have to say. They say, okay, mine is right, I have a PhD, I have to publish, I have to make a career, and so my interest in science communication, how I can present my research better, possibly to people that will give me the next postdoc grants. Instead, people from India, especially in Brazil, that I had, they were so much aware that if without science and technology, their country cannot develop. And so they were really interested in the communication of science. Maybe this perception of the importance of science and technology is so strong in this country because they see that they need electricity, they need energy, they need transports, they need food, good food, they need quality water, they need, I imagine that I cannot speak for direct knowledge, but I saw in the students that they are so much more interested in this kind of things.
Daniela, ahora sí.
They need computers, Wi-Fi in the villages.
¿no? Gracias por la conferencia. Y bueno, son digamos que dos preguntas en una más o menos ya la respondí un poco. Era, me da la sensación de que los científicos ya formados, a una buena parte no les interesa, o no pueden, no lo sé, la comunicación al público. Entonces, mi pregunta es, su experiencia específicamente con científicos, o sea, ¿qué reacción tienen ellos? Estoy hablando en general, no solo con los más jóvenes, con los más viejos, sino en general acerca de la comunicación, la divulgación. Repito, a mí me da la sensación de que no les interesa mucho, pero yo, bueno, ahorita veo pocos aquí a comparación de otros seminarios. Esa es una. Y otra, yo creo que es bien importante irse, digamos, pues a las bases, ¿no? A los estudiantes más jóvenes, niños, y a quienes los forman. Entonces también, ¿qué reacción ha tenido si es que ha habido algún acercamiento específicamente solo con los maestros? O sea, ¿qué reacción hay tanto de los científicos como de los maestros, que yo creo que son fuentes bien importantes de la posterior visión científica de los ciudadanos?
Well, for the first question, I think that there are different kinds of scientists. I think that, for example, physicists, I know very well physicists. I'm surrounded by physicists, and I think that there are two opposite attitudes that are both, I think, acceptable. From one part of the physicists, they say, I'm a researcher. I want to do research, and it's my job, and it's my interest, it's my life. I want to do research. I appreciate what you do, but I won't do that because it's not my job, and so I'm not really interested in that. But from the other side, many big institutions that do science communication, like science centers, were funded by physicists. For example, Oppenheimer, first of all, Frank Oppenheimer is the one that built up the exploratorium in San Francisco. He was a physicist. And Wagensberg and Cosmo Caixa in Barcelona is a physicist. And Budenich, that was in my town, he was the one. And so, it's also true that some of the physicists, for example, the scientists, they, at a certain point, maybe not at the beginning of the career, but maybe a bit later in the career, where they already had a position and respect, etc., they say, okay, I think that science communication is so important, and so I will work on it. And I think that both things are respectable. And I think that in any kind of group of scientists, there are these two levels. Apart from the scientists that are, for their own discipline, directly in strict contact with the public, that of course they all want to do science communication, like volcanologists, seismologists, oncologists. There are a group of scientists that cannot avoid to communicate, and so in these groups, of course, everybody not sort of interested. In other kind of groups, like mathematicians, etc., it's a bit different. The other question, absolutely, yes. I didn't mention because I have no time, but all these, the museum, science center, all the activity that involve schools have special programs also for the teachers. That you work with the classes when they come, but also you work along with teachers in special programs like updating courses, all this kind of and in many European countries, teachers are not so well trained in science and in science education, and so there is the need that museums, research institutes, whatever, they work on that. Absolutely, yes, it's needed. And we do, yeah, we do. There are a lot of European projects also that are very big projects that are about the training of teachers at the European level on specific topics or methodologies.
I introduce a comment
She
here.
was waiting.
Marta.
Marta.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Muchas gracias por la conferencia. Mi nombre es Marta y yo tengo una inquietud. Yo sé, según nos comentó ya Miguel, que has colaborado con la UNAM de cerca con el proyecto de Universo, que ya prácticamente tiene 30 años. Yo con Universo detecto como que un cambio justamente hacia la divulgación de la ciencia en México. Se han sumado otros proyectos como Papalote, el MOCA y otros centros científicos que tratan de seguir el patrón interactivo, ¿no? Pero lo veo como cortado en la cadena que tú mencionas para llegar a una participación activa y conjunta de la población en esto de la ciencia. ¿Cómo ves tú el desarrollo de la divulgación científica en México, sobre todo a partir de los principales proyectos que tenemos básicamente aquí en esta ciudad, ¿no? Que es Universum, Papalote?
Sí, yo no puedo decir que conozco muchísimo porque he participado ahora en ese seminario, que es un seminario dedicado a la figura, la personalidad del guía. ¿Quién es el guía? ¿Quién trabaja con la gente? ¿Y cuál tipo de formación tiene que tener el guía? Entonces mi visión es muy poco limitada y yo pienso que unos cambios ¿cómo puedo decir? Mejorar la situación y ampliar la capacidad no puede ser hecha para una institución sola. Eso quería decir. O sea que ni Papalote, ni Universum, ni Museo de la Luz, ni ningún museo aquí puede realmente enfrentarse con unos problemas que son muy grandes sin un trabajo común. Por ejemplo, en Europa nosotros fuimos muy, ¿cómo se dice? Well, we improved a lot because we have the European Association of the Science Centers and Science Museum, EXCITE, and we work a lot at the European level because sometimes, for example, you have not the expert inside your institution, or you have not the resources to bring experts, or you have no, etc. And the only way to really work is work together. I think that they began here. I think this is the way. For example, social inclusions. I have no any previous experience in social inclusion because in Italy for many years we have not so much this problem. We have immigrants that are coming more and more in the last years, and so I need British or French because they had a problem with social inclusion till 50 years ago, and so I need to learn from them. And so, if I would invent again the wheel, it would take a lot of time. Why? I will listen, and then of course I won't copy what they do. I think here the same. Well, probably all the community of museums here should say which are our challenges, and how we can help each other to change these challenges, to face the challenges.
Sí, porque
Buenas tardes, Miguel Ángel Mendoza, gracias por su ponencia. Mi pregunta, es una sola pregunta dirigida hacia conocer un poco su experiencia. En México apenas en mayo salió una encuesta sobre percepción de la gente sobre la ciencia y la tecnología. Y en grandes rasgos, en general, la gente cree más en cuestiones místicas aún que en cuestiones científicas. Y así nos podemos ir sobre todas las cosas, la importancia de que para la gente es el conocimiento de la tecnología y para los que nos dedicamos a eso. Pues hay una brecha tremenda en cuanto a eso. En cuanto a su experiencia, ¿qué políticas públicas podrían ser importantes? Por ejemplo, en esta gráfica que muestra, va muy de la mano, por ejemplo, Noruega, Dinamarca. En los estudios mundiales siempre los vemos, Producto Interno Bruto, estabilidad económica, patentes y también desarrollo social. Y en la otra gráfica que mostraba, cómo incluir el conocimiento, la divulgación de ciencia, yo le llamo en algunos libros encontrado la democratización del conocimiento de la ciencia, en los planes de estudio desde los inicios de los primeros años en los niños. Porque finalmente, a lo mejor, aunque no nos dediquen esos niños a ser científicos, en muchos lugares donde he estado, parecía como que se acabó la universidad y después cuando van a trabajar no tiene nada que ver los conocimientos científicos en la aplicación de lo que es. Pero eso se nota porque finalmente en los programas desde un inicio la matematización como herramienta, generar la utilidad de ciertas herramientas de conocimiento no se ven como necesarias. ¿Cuál sería usted que hace una política pública que se podría modificar?
Well, there are a lot of questions inside. I don't know which one to take it first. Well, first of all, of course, science education in the school has to be empowered. That's for sure. And so, for example, in Italy, we had, 30 years ago, compulsory hours paid by the government for teachers to update themselves. So, all teachers in Italy were obliged for 40 years a year to update themselves. And they had a very, very small amount of money for that. It was very, very like symbolic, but it was symbolic, and so they felt that they were paid for it. And so every year, every teachers all around Italy, they updated themselves, following different courses. For example, there is the mathematical societies, they do something, they go there. There is, I don't know, the engineer board, I go there, etc. And that was fantastic. At a certain point, the government cut, and the teachers are not updated anymore. They don't do any updating. And so, for example, some things for me has to be compulsory. Is compulsory the updating of the doctors, medicine doctors in Italy? They have to update every 2 years something or hours. Same has to be for teachers. This is for teachers if I have to think about policy. Another policy for me should be that all the people that work in science, all the careers in science and technology should have a bit of studies on the relationship between science and society, science communication, etc. Because when the scientists come out of that, they should be ready to know that there are these kind of problems. Maybe they will come out to be just poor researchers without any kind of, but maybe not, and that should be compulsory too, because they don't know. They don't know. And this is very important that they are aware that maybe tomorrow they have to speak with the politicians. How they will speak with the politicians. Maybe tomorrow they will speak to the audience. How they have to speak. So that for me also should be compulsory in all the courses. All the courses. And there was another thing that I wanted to say, but I forgot.
Democratizar la ciencia, o divulgar la ciencia, pero de manera, el acceso efectivo a la ciencia en la población.
What to do about the citizen? Ah, yes, that's what I wanted to say. We have in Italy also strong movements against, for example, the traditional medicine. Yeah. They, for example, are strong movements against vaccines, against the use of antibiotics, etc. And there is a lot of people that prefer to take Bach flowers, crystallography, kind of crazy things instead of taking an antibiotics. Sometimes you have to take a penicillin. No, they want to, and this is quite complicated to deal with because, for example, if the people who sustain this kind of traditional, they are not traditional, they're just alternative, crazy medicine. It's not like to have a traditional medicine. It's different. These are just invention that we invented yesterday. And the people who believe that, they believe that, for example, all in the pharmaceutical industries are they just want to gain money, and they don't trust in trials, etc., etc. So how to do? It's not easy. It's not easy to convince these people, to talk with these people. And for me, the only way I'm not speaking what I personally would do. I personally would not allow the national health system to pay for medicine that have not proved with the medicine trial. We have to speak with the people in very small groups, like not just in conference, but really to go to the people and to speak to the people in the hospital and to speak to the people that work in these people and make them understand that, for example, medicine is not the Bible, and but there is a process to learn things in medicine, that is something that we can control. And I cannot control if just one person tells me that if I put that on my desk, I will learn more. You know? And we have to make understand what is a trial, what is a data, this is important, very important. But this is something that you cannot do just with a campaign, a general campaign. You are really to go and in the same time you have, for example, to teach medicine doctor to speak with the people. Because sometimes medicine doctors are horrible. They don't speak with the people. They cannot treat the patients. And the patient go out and take the bottle of flowers. But this is very complicated. We have the symptom.
No es tu nombre. Yo me aprendo todas las.
First, I want to.
Tu nombre?
Dante León.
Sí.
The first question is about the Science Cafe, because I have a doubt here. You speak something like the people is motivated. So what is the motivation to go into a science cafe? The point or the people that is interested to go there, who is? Because if you put it only in a paper, newspaper, we're going to do a science cafe, which kind of people is going to go there? The same of the same?
No, you're right. There is a problem there. It's not easy. Well, usually you use the location for the people that is used to go in that location. For example, the Science Cafe in Cagliari, we did it in 2 different places. In one place is a mediateca, in which all the young people go for study. They bring their own books and they go for study in the cafe. It is nice to stay there and study. And so we organized the Science Cafe for young people there, because we know that the young people is there, and so they are already there, and then we have. And the Science Cafe for adults, let's say we organize it in another cafe. This is a bit more posh, and where adults go and they have drinks, etc. And so the problem is that you have. For that reason, in my last slide I say who you want to talk with, where they are, what they do. They go to the pub, they go to the movies. They want to have, you have to understand their profile. When you know their profile, you can do something for them. Okay. It's not easy, but you have to make a profile.
Yes, because here I have another question related about that. Because here I don't know really, but I don't know some cafe here in Mexico that the people go to study. Really. The most similar, I suppose, is Starbucks. But, they are watching a video on YouTube.
But you can do the science restaurant, the science comida corrida. The people is eating everywhere. Maybe a restaurant is a good place. If there is a restaurant in which you go and have a lot of place.
No, cervecerías para jóvenes.
Okay.
No, los science cafés son también para adultos, son también para adultos, pero depende del lugar a donde lo vas a hacer.
Yes, really, because I'm convinced that it's functional, but I have some worry about, okay, it's the same for the same people interested, but I don't think it will expand.
No, yeah, that was just an example. Example of the things that is not the right solution for everybody. There are science cafes, but there are also, you can go in, for example, we organize discussion games in libraries, public libraries, in other kind of public space. No, it's not just there.
Yes, okay.
It depends on the people that you want to target. You have to understand where they are, what they want, what they know, what they would like to have. How can I speak exactly with them?
Because here would be fascinating doing something in a stadium of football.
Yeah,
really perfect. But I can't realize the connection.
Well, this is creativity. You have to invent something.
Yes, I suppose.
I haven't needed that. We can think more about tomorrow and after tomorrow.
Okay.
How can have the people crazy for sports?
Yes.
Dos últimas intervenciones, Rocío, y luego un comentario de Ricardo. Rocío, primero.
Thank you very much. I think, yes, it's necessary to have models in order to avoid some stereotypes. For example, if you if you get more women studying maths or studying physics or studying engineering through this kind of events. Is it one of your goals to increase, for example, women students in some scientific careers? And the other question is, are people conscious about the public resources to science and technology? Do they know about the budget? They expect some benefits because they contribute with their taxes to finance the science and technology.
Well, for the first questions, yes. We had some, like 20 years ago, a crisis in the inscriptions to scientific careers in all Europe. It was dramatic. The people who was not more registered into physics, chemistry, mathematics. We had a drop like that. In Trieste, for example, we had some years in which the first year's students for the licenciatura in physics were 20, less than 20. It's incredible, you know. But I have to say that all these kind of activities, and in our towns we did a lot of activities, had an impact. I cannot prove that, of course, because it's very difficult. There are ways to, of course, to make research, but it's quite difficult to be certain to say. I cannot prove that, but 2 years ago we had 130 students first year at the Institute of Physics. And so it's true that we had a drop, and now we are increasing the numbers in languages. So yes, I think we had an impact, and this is more or less in Europe everywhere. So I think we had an impact on that. And now, of course, more attention to girls, etc., etc. And underrepresented public, underrepresented community. So maybe in Oxford there are no many black people, colored people. There are all white, but it's true. Unfortunately, it's true. And so the attention is now to target also other underrepresented groups, not only girls. The second, I think that the people, in my experience, I never met citizens that were complaining about money given to science. I don't think that this is our problem. That citizens are very angry about money given to politicians. I'm not doing politics, it's just what's happening in Italy at the moment, because the people think that a politician have a lot of privilege, like cars, or, you know, and the people is very angry. I never in my life learned that people was complaining for money given to radio astronomers or oncologists. I don't know if you hear that that's, for the politician it's different. You have to demonstrate that they have to give you money. That's different. But the common people, the citizen, normal people, I never experienced this kind of problems. Also because, you know, when they build a motorway, the money they spend for a motorway is so much more, bigger budget than what they give to a radio astronomer or an oncologist. You know, there are bigger budgets than the science budgets.
I have two commentaries. One which is related to what Eugenio was saying about the importance of science. I note that in most newspapers you have two sections, culture and science, as if science does not belong to culture. I see science, in particular basic science, question, what is it really good for? Whereas I see nobody questioning poetry, literature, philosophy, history. What is really good for? And the general perception is, I have a neighbor that is convinced he's an intellectual because he watches the Discovery Channel. in general, people have no idea what a mathematician does. To them, mathematics is adding, subtracting, occasionally a fraction. Finally, speaking of perception, I would like to hear your opinion on the importance of the series The Big Bang Theory in the perception of science.
Well, about newspapers, there are there was a debate. There were scientists and science journalists that say, okay, it's better that our news go inside the journal, because, for this reason that you told, because we want science to be inside in the pages in which there are culture, history, etc. So that we want to give an idea of the human development as a whole. It's not a science and technology separated. That was a school. And the other school, or the other opinion was, no, it's better to have a separate page, because in that respect we are sure that we have a space, because if not, they won't give us a space. And I have to say that the second one were right, because in Italy we have different newspapers with different policies. The one that had the science and technology pages, and the one that had science inside the third page, the culture page. And in fact, in the ones in which there is not a specific position, science does not appear so much. So in theory, it would be very good to have all together, but in practice, the director won't give you space if you have not your space. That's mine.
All I was saying was about perception of the public.
Yeah. But well, I think that in Europe at the moment, I have to say there is no more the perception that science and technology are not important. I think that at the moment, on the contrary, there is a big, appreciations of science and technologies as culture. And when you organize a science festival, you have millions of people that comes, because that's changed. We have been working for 30 years, not me 30, but over 30, and the things have changed. The people is really interested in science and technology. Now there are science books that sell like bestsellers. There are conferences of scientists in which you have the people that make the queue outside because they want to listen, so they don't understand anything, but they want to listen. No, I think that this is fine. And this is and about the Big Bang Theory, numbers, etc. I think that they are doing a very good job, because you can be agree or to not agree with some details or whatever. But they, in USA, they designed this series exactly to support the knowledge of certain field or promote certain professions, scientific professions. So I think they are perfect. In Italy, all teenagers are looking for Big Bang Theory. Never the theoretical physicists had such an attention like
school.
Yeah. Then that's very important. Sometimes the scientists look just at the detail. They say, "Oh, this is very wrong," and condemn all the. I think that you have to look more at the big effect. The big impact is good. Everybody is speaking about theoretical physics. Everybody is speaking about some theories or something. That's good. Also, if inside there are some details, that's not matter. They will disappear in the memory of people.
No, un momento. Yo tengo un comentario como de costumbre, pero primero el anuncio del próximo seminario. Vamos a tener, de hecho, está conectado con esta separación entre ciencias sociales y humanidades y las ciencias duras. Eugenio Friccione, bueno, ya se fue, pero nos va a presentar un estudio que hizo sobre la evaluación, también en México ahora el tema de evaluación es un tema muy importante, en un área del SNI que aquí en el Cinvestav casi no nos preocupa, que es el área 4 de humanidades. Entonces él tuvo más que idea una decisión tremenda de cambiarse de ciencias biológicas a humanidades, ahora hace un poco de filosofía y historia de la ciencia, y le ha ido como en feria en esa área. Entonces nos va a presentar, yo creo que va a ser muy interesante para los que les interesa la cienciometría, una forma de evaluar que yo creo que los colegas de ciencias sociales y humanidades no se les ha ocurrido. Yo les he dicho que deberían de publicarlo en una revista profesional, que es generar un factor de impacto para libros. O sea, generalmente el factor de impacto pues lo tenemos y es muy conocido para revistas, pero para libros no hay algo similar. Bueno, es Miguel Sosa, Lulú, que no sé cómo se apellida,
Samarripa
y Eugenio hicieron un estudio,
Gerardo.
lo van a presentar aquí la próxima semana, entonces esa va a ser el seminario. Y mi comentario tiene que ver con algo que ha impulsado Leon Lederman en Estados Unidos. Leon Lederman es un premio Nobel, descubridor de partículas, pero además es un administrador, fue un administrador, ya está retirado de la administración. Fue director de Fermilab, y entonces se planteó esta pregunta también, sobre todo en Estados Unidos, ¿por qué la gente joven en Estados Unidos, los americanos nativos, no los indios, todos los gringos, ya no les interesa tanto hacer una carrera científica o tecnológica? Y entonces, después de recibir el premio Nobel, hizo una fundación para promover la enseñanza de las ciencias entre la gente joven. Entonces tuvo dos muy buenas ideas. Una no funcionó. La primera, que no funcionó, tiene que ver con esto del Big Bang Theory, del espectáculo de televisión. Pero a él lo que se le ocurrió y quiso impulsarlo fue que en Fermilab ocurriera una de estas series, novelas, como ocurre en un hospital. O sea, hay varias series de hospitales donde se enamoran los protagonistas. Pero él quería que fueran Fermilab y estaba dispuesto a proporcionar los puestos de instalaciones, pero la gente de la televisión dijo, no, y eso fue muchos años antes que esto de Big Bang, pero yo creo que hubiera sido también un
buena
éxito,
idea, muy buena idea.
pero no tuvo éxito. Y la segunda idea, que sí le funcionó muy bien, fue, sobre todo a él le interesó mucho a la gente joven, los teenagers, los de las prepas, los estudiantes de las prepas, y entonces lo que se le ocurrió fue un poquito, vi esto de seleccionar el blanco del público que se puede interesar más en una actividad, y él lo que hizo fue los sábados invitar a dos preparatorias diferentes de Chicago, pero que entre ellos se sienten competidores, ya sea privada o pública. Entonces los invitaba simultáneamente y después de hacerles un tour, les ofrecían hamburguesas, un poquito de cerveza, algo de helado, etcétera, o sea, lo que le gusta a la gente joven. Y luego ya empezaban a interaccionar con los investigadores, y había una especie de competencia para ver quiénes hacían las mejores preguntas de las dos escuelas. Después de ahí se organizaba la competencia y funcionaba muy bien, no sé si todavía lo haga. Entonces es como una combinación de un día de puertas abiertas, pero muy dirigido a un público específico que era el que le interesaba. Entonces también ahí por ahí en Estados Unidos hay también interés en comunicar la ciencia en este lugar. Y finalmente, bueno, quiero agradecerle a Paola esta primera actividad. Mañana va a tener, martes y miércoles va a tener mucho trabajo. Es un taller muy interesante. Quedo por ahora, entonces entrego el reconocimiento.